Meeting for February 9th, and I'm calling the meeting to order. So just a reminder to everybody as well, this meeting's live streamed and video recorded for the public. So I guess we just have everybody's got the agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda? Don't see any. And so can I have a motion to adopt the agenda from somebody?
Sure.
Kevin, seconded by Kate. All in favor? Done. Great. Okay. We have 2 sets of minutes this evening to look at. Did everybody get a chance to look them over? And were there any issues with any of them? Okay, so the one was from quite a long time ago, October 27th, 2022. I'm not sure how that got dropped down there, and then the second set was from our last meeting on January 26th. So if there's no issues with them, I think we can probably just vote on them together. So can I have a motion to accept both sets of minutes as presented?
So moved.
Sorry?
So moved.
Okay, Tony moves and Ken seconds. Okay.
I'm done.
You're seconding, Ken, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, great. All in favor? Great. Okay. So we have 2 presentations this evening, and the first one is a property on Bradley Street, and Christine Mays, our city planner, will introduce it. Go ahead, Christine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So development permit application DP 1293 is for a 3-story apartment building, which comprises of 5 2-bedroom units, dwelling units. The subject property is zoned medium density residential, so that is R8, as designated neighborhood in the city plan. The property is located on the north side of Bradley Street, and that's between Millstone Avenue and Holly Avenue. The subject property also falls within Development Permit Area 8, so that's form and character, and that's the general design permit area design guidelines apply to the proposed development. There are a number of variances that are associated with the proposal. The first being to reduce the west side yard setback from 3 meters to 1 meter, 1.5 meters, reduce the refuse enclosure setback to the west side lot line, and that's from 3 meters to 0.64 meters, reduce the minimum landscape buffer, and that's from 1.8 meters to 0 meters. And that also includes the minimum landscape treatment level. So that's a 2 to a 0. Also to increase the percentage of small car parking spaces, and that's 40% to 63%, and reduce the driveway width for a double lane driveway, and that's 5.5 meters to 3.5 meters. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions. Sorry, Madam Chair, you're muted.
Mic's off.
I clicked on something and lost my screen. Sorry. Okay. Excuse me. Before we get going, do any of the panel members want to ask the staff any questions about this property? Seeing none, we'll let the presenters or the applicants go ahead. And who's presenting this evening?
It'll be me.
That's Raymond.
Raymond, yeah.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay. Just like to introduce Aziz, who's listening in. He's worked on the project. 2 other people, Clarissa and Ruben, probably in our office as well. So we started this a while back, but it got delayed for a bit, and so we're off again. And also we got Rasher here, who's the landscape architecture. And Braden, I don't think he's here today. So from Newcastle Engineering. So I guess I will start then. So am I able to share my screen?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Yep. Do I have to click something somewhere? Oh, share screen. Okay. Maybe we got the right one. Yep. Okay. So this was a project that started a little while back. It's a we said, a 5-unit building, 3 stories. Anybody who's familiar with architectural terms, I guess this is actually a kind of a dingbat prototype that was, you probably saw in the 60s and 70s, probably back in California, I think is most of them where we saw. There's actually one on Selby and Comox. That's like this. So it's a prototype like that. So I'll just give you a little brief context in case you don't know. We're working on this site over here right now as a DP or a renewal of DP. We're straddled here between another R8 lot and an R1 lot here. The existing house sits in about right here, and then there's another, I think 3 or 4 story apartment building in the back of us. So, and so I don't think we won't need to talk about the project data stuff because I think Christine talked about that. Again, this is the neighboring house here. This is the lot right in here. And that's the single family dwelling over there. Everybody can see my cursor, I take it, right? Yeah. And that's the lot there. This is the large fir tree there. We were hoping actually to save it, but it just won't work. It's too big for the rest of the site. So because this went through a DP before, there's actually road dedication that's already been taken along the frontage here. And then there's the other house that we're up against there. So it's a very narrow road. It's only 30 kilometers an hour, supposedly. And that just gives you an idea. And then this is what's on the other side of the property here. So, and then just looking down, and that's Bowen. I was going to say Bowen Park, but yeah, Millstone River down there. And that's just looking the other way. So it's kind of very narrow in here. This was the original concept. So again, this was a Part 9 building, which had 4 units, yeah. 3 stories, and each one of the units had their individual stairs that went up, including this one here, and then the utility and everything there. Same orientation, same driveway. Owners came to us and just said, could we fit a little bit more on there? It's kind of tight, but we tried to reduce the variances of what this one had in terms of they had a larger variance on the front, a larger variance on the back here and here. And also the roadway was a little bit narrower. So that's primarily the difference. That gives you kind of the context. There's the road dedication that's in place there, the setbacks of what that is. And here's where the old house is or was, and these are the decks. There's a little bit of a grade difference along the back here, and there's a couple of little trees. And this is actually the big fir tree that was in the way or had to be probably going to get removed there, and same with this one here. So again, a little bit different. The parking and garbage was over here on this part of the site. So basically it took that same concept. So again, we tried to keep out of the setback on the front, and then we moved this building back to at least 5 feet. The other one was a 4-foot scheme, and it was encroaching. It had the front variance probably more like about around there. So again, if we had the variance on here, we'd probably make all these larger car stalls and push everything over. So and then this is kind of the common outdoor space, kind of room for the fire truck to come in, to get in, so that we're within 15 meters of that. And basically it's just a simple building. A lot of these dingbats had either parking on one or both sides, and then there were usually 2 or 3 levels. And for the architects in the room, these are kind of more like single, I guess you call them exit stairs or access stairs. And so we can avoid the public corridor bit once we do a 3-story building in Part 3. So then this is just, it allows us also, as you will see on the next floor up, to be able to have actually secondary means of egress off of the bedrooms. So again, that'd be kind of more just for emergency use. And this allowed us to have a little bit more kind of a fancier, kind of more lobby 3-story kind of space. So there's a skylight up above, and then we'd be planting some landscaping around there, and then just sneaking a little bit of landscape along the edge, and then with some fencing around, which Rashur can talk about a little bit more. I don't know if anybody got the reply that we sent back to Christine today or not about some of the staff comments. If they didn't, I guess I can kind of explain that a little bit, why we did what we did. So we tried to keep the building on this side of the lot like the original scheme, so that this R1 lot here, we're not going to shade it as much. It has also a lot more room for landscaping. I think ultimately this one will get redeveloped as well, even though it'll have to go through rezoning because it's R1 and it is suburban neighborhood, I believe. And this is neighborhood and neighborhood here. And I wouldn't be surprised to see these ones. This one's pretty well a blank wall, and there's a little bit of a balcony over here if you haven't seen that. And there's a little bit of a height difference along here. 0.5 meter, 3/4 meter, depending on how we grade this in here. So So we just tried to focus. This little canopy sticks out a little bit, so we'll see it in the 3D. So just go through the plans because the plans kind of relate back to the setbacks and everything of the parking stalls and how we're dealing with the heat pumps and the bike parking. Oh, there's a comment of hoping to have the bikes off of here as one of the guidelines. So again, we felt it was such a small project that we'd be better to put it in the back ourselves and keep this kind of free and clean and clear. So that's a little bit more simple building form and just less clutter, and that we would actually prefer to just texture this whole parking lot here. I mean, I guess suppose we could do it in a different color or something, but the same material. I can put another out. We avoided because there was very little room to put the outdoor parking or the bike parking, short-term visitor. So we have it inside, but I can certainly move this door over just to try and explain. And then we could park a bike along the wall here. Because this isn't a real exit stair too, I can technically have a door through into here because normally we're not allowed storage or bikes into a exit stair. So it's a little bit different. That's why the building is only 3 stories, because we can only take these exiting or egress requirements with this size of building and height. In terms of access from this patio area, we'd like to, again, try and keep it private. So we'd probably put some stepping stones or something and kind of tuck a gate in here. It's a real problem. There's a lot of homeless people in this neighborhood along from the river and on the back here. So we don't want to make it too inviting. I guess that's one of our concerns. And we don't want to have to lock it, fence it. It's amazing how many places we go to now where we're getting people install gates in front of their businesses and other things and basically locking people in. So I ran into 2 of them yesterday. Not in Nanaimo, but one in Mission and, Mission Thrift, but in Duncan. I'm just dealing with street people issues. So, and then basically it's just the same unit for all 3 floors, 1 on the ground floor, and then 3. And then that way we have 3 units facing south because we wanted to be solar oriented and keep a really clean, compact form to make it as energy efficient as possible. And then, like I say, it becomes a bit more of a lobby or kind of more interesting space than just a strict utilitarian. If I had to put a public corridor through, I wouldn't be able to fit any of this. So, and then we have some nice generous decks on that. So again, on the top floor, there'd be vaulted ceilings of these units, and then it allows me to hide some solar that we'll rough in to put on this roof later. Roof hatch here in case I need to put some of the heat pumps up in here. But right now we show them all down below, down along in here against the walls, which we often end up doing on some larger multifamily projects. This is just an idea of what it might look like on there. It's just kind of very generic before the landscape architect did their special work along there. Again, trying to landscape around this and kind of keep the summit hidden, but keep eyes on the street. So that's the beauty of this. And also that they're relatively covered and deal with solar shading. The canopy sticking out a little bit, and a little bit different texture to just break this up a bit. So all the materials are hardy. And then some real wood underneath the soffits and stuff where it's a little bit more protected. And maybe Rusher can talk about some of the lighting. So some of this will be lit along here, and then it'll be a little bit more enticing to come in. And then everything else is hidden from behind. Just another view down the side. Again, much the same way. We tried to avoid a lot of the windows on this side because we're trying to keep it private to this piece of property here. And these ones too, we'd end up putting, or what our initial thoughts are, is that would be translucent glass or frosted glass on the sides and then clear on the front. So again, we're not looking into the side yard so much because these are all tucked in a bit. So it makes it a little bit more private for the neighbors. This is the other side here. This is the roof. This grade isn't quite, this is from a program called CAD Mapper, so it just takes it very generic. You can see that these buildings are not really buried in the ground, so it's not quite that severe. So again, lots of landscaping on the sides. Again, this just be the parking area under there, and then the other smaller parking stalls. We kept this would have a sliding gate across it, so it'd slide one way or the other so you don't see it, but these are using the smaller totes to get in and out. And then that way they can always wheel it up over to here when it comes pickup day, private contractor. I don't see actually the garbage truck coming in here unless they have a special one. And like in my strata, we actually had for probably about a year, just a really large flatbed pickup truck kept up all of our garbage in Long Lake Heights, which is really steep and narrow and hard for people to get their bins up. So same sort of technique. Just a little bit more detail about that. And then you can see into the lobby and inside there. So they got a little bit of room to get away, and this is a little bit wider than the previous scheme for driveway. Again, the idea being that people are only going 30 kilometers an hour on the road, and then if they hit a textured material along there, then they'll hopefully slow down a little bit more. Again, we're only dealing with 5 units, so we have to be careful that people don't steal all their furniture too. So we'll talk about that, and that's why this some landscaping, so it kind of keeps eyes on the street a little bit, which is missing on some of the other projects like next door. I think that's about it. That's just really quick. So if it's okay, I'll let Rashur talk. And
do you want to Raymond project the landscape drawings as well?
I can, yeah. Just let me. Are these? Hopefully, yeah. That's the correct one. Yeah. You just tell me Bing or
yeah, sure.
Next. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, I guess Raymond's done a great job in kind of explaining what kind of intent the landscape is expected to have on this design. There's a rather, he wanted to have a rather clean access to the rear yard. We just have some ornamental grasses at the property's edge. There's screening on the property here. The biggest concern that we faced while dealing with the designing the landscape here was with the city about retention of trees. And there's some trees. Can you go to the tree retention sheet first so that we can talk about it first and then come back?
Is this the one?
No, it's further along. It's further along.
Okay, sure. Oh.
A different folder.
Oh, is in a different folder, that one? Oh, okay, sorry. Under the arborist?
Yeah.
It was also in the landscape set, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whichever one we have. Yeah, that's good. That should be enough. So there's a huge Douglas fir here that came very close to the foundation, obviously needed to be taken away. If you just pan it a little further north. Yeah, so there's also a large tree on the property line here. There was a contorta, Pinus contorta here, which was also very close to where the excavation for the parking stalls at the rear are going to be. So these three had interference with the root system, so they need to be taken off as well, as much as we would have liked to keep, especially the ones at the back. So the only one that eventually we managed to retain was the one that you see on the top right out here, which is the southwest corner. It's a little Norway maple, relatively young, that is on the street there. And so we've kind of worked with this situation. Now we can go back to the landscape plan. Yeah, the ones, the sheets in the beginning, just the concept would be good enough. Yeah, that's good. I think that's good. The one next to this one. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so there was amenity area proposed in the front. We still wanted to retain a lot of trees, or not retain, substitute and provide with a lot of trees. We wanted to have at least one flowering prominent tree in the front. So we chose Magnolia Elizabeth out here, some blood goods to add color, and something like a Circinatum here, which were a tight area, which could grow and create more of a natively available tree. And then another Elizabeth here. We tried keeping some shade-loving shrubs and adequate screening for the patios and the units here. And similarly, flowering kind of shrubs on this side as well, along with the fence. So it kind of softens the fence a little bit and have a good quality fencing. Don't have too much space available, so we didn't have much space to create screening there. There was also a question from from the staff about having weather protected amenity here, but I guess we kind of chatted about it and realized that since we are providing a lot of tree cover, a thick kind of a planting in the front, that is probably adequate terms of protection, weather protection, and we didn't think that another layer of either arbor or pergola or a covered thing would go or add anything to the project at all. We've tried going as much as possible with the permeable pavers, just change of shades and colors for wayfinding, parking stalls, movement lines, and then entrance to the variety of functions. Just around the main entry, the patios, etc., we've chosen some different surface treatments and gone ahead with stamped concrete and some other pavers. Added a lot of variety, especially where the shaded plants were needed. We've used some ferns, we've used some Honia aquifoliums, we've used kinnikinnick for the edges, used the scale of planting as best as we could. There was questions about lighting. Can you just open the lighting plan a little bit? It's probably further along. Yeah, that one. So we've done and provided adequate lighting where we thought the building lighting would not reach. So the parking stalls, the amenity area, etc. And out here in the driveway and this area, I think and there's ample opportunity for providing lighting on the building to be thrown on the surfaces. So we did not want to add any additional lighting up there. You want to go a little forward? I can talk a little bit about the kind of materials we are using. So Aquapave series used for majority of those, I guess, permeable pavers. Aluminum privacy fences, wood quality fencing used there, and yeah, wherever we needed transparent fencing, we've got Emery-Star there. So that's about it that we have. If you have any questions, let us know.
Great. Okay. Is that the end of your presentation, Raymond?
I think I just wanted to comment, I guess, just under this patio area here, there is to deal with some of the excess water that's on the site, an underground storage chamber for the water in terms of what we require on the site. So, yeah, it's pretty simple otherwise.
Okay. So if you're done, maybe just stop sharing your screen. Great. So at this point, we'll do a little round table with our panel, and the panel will have an opportunity to ask you any questions and also share their comments and suggestions with you. So perhaps, Kevin, you'd like to go ahead first? Kevin there? Okay. Sure. How about Kate? Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. I really like that, Raymond. You decided to go with this dingbat style building architecture, and I think it's really great, especially in comparison to the other. I don't know, duplexes or whatever there is next to you, that you've put the parking in the back. I think that is very smart, especially because it's against another parking lot that's on the back property. And so I really appreciate that was the approach, and especially, and so I can understand all the variances that are being asked for given the tightness of the site and what you've been able to fit on the site. I agree with your team. I don't think a covered area in the front I don't think it's necessary, and I think it would take away from the architecture and the aesthetic you're trying to achieve, and what you're doing with the layered plantings, because you have a number of different trees and plants, and I think you're creating there's a nice sense of enclosure with what you have there. The one question I have for the landscape architect is I wouldn't mind a little more clarity on where you're proposing what type of fencing. So I know you showed us the two types, but where you're proposing what kind would be helpful.
And I guess I can share my screen again.
Okay.
The one that's better than the other, sure.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm having a bit of a challenge. Sure.
Okay. I think we may have shown it too, but
No.
Okay.
This is perfect. This is good enough. It's easy. So we have the 6-foot fence that you see, which is kind of a screening fence on this side, basically the east, west, and the north, which is the 2 long sides and the back. And we have the transparent Emery Star fence right in the front.
Okay.
Here, right.
And is it will be lower, like
That's right. That's right.
yeah, okay. My only thought on that was just if we're looking at the drawing right now, the top long edge, yeah, that corner, it might feel, given I was just sort of having the 6-foot fence come right to the corner might feel too closed off from the street, and it might be nicer having the lower fence wrap around a little bit and sort of set back a little, just so you.
I agree. I agree. I agree. If it could return, maybe not the entire setback, but maybe at least half the setback, it'll add a lot of character, and I think it'll be a good idea.
Yeah, because it just might feel too enclosed because it's so narrow.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
So that would be my one recommendation.
Absolutely great idea.
Okay, wonderful. And then I just want to clarify, thanks. I think it's okay to stop sharing, Raymond. Just to clarify, you are putting on the garbage enclosure kind of like a gate or something, right?
That's the intent, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I know it's something we have to do.
You could paint them beautiful, so.
Yeah, that'd be nice. And I also, I'm not sure, but I suppose one of the comments from staff, which it's always nice to consider the pedestrian and how they move, even though I think there isn't going to be a lot of conflict with pedestrians and cars on your site, but certainly an easy way to approach that is just a change of surfacing. So you do already have a few different paving patterns and paving materials happening. And so you could consider just changing that material so it kind of appears like you have a pedestrian walkway up to the front entry. And that may also work as a wayfinding mechanism, even though I don't think it will be that hard to find.
Actually, what you're saying also makes sense. That when a person drives and he sees a different color or a texture or something, the subconscious takes over and makes the person drive in the middle of that lane rather than the total width. So maybe that is also, from safety wise, it might be desirable.
Yeah, and so just I'm going to make that as a recommendation to consider just changing the paving pattern to indicate pedestrian, and then it would also improve wayfinding to the front door.
Sure, perfect.
On the sidewalk, yeah. And my only other, I think you might be ambitious with your thin strip of plants on the no setback side for space, but I always encourage squishing plants in, so I was kind of happy to see the effort made there. But some effort is better than no, I think. But yeah, and you have a nice mix of plants and perennials and evergreens and shrubs, and so I think you got a good mix palette, and I don't have much else to say. And that I appreciate. I think when you're developing a site of this the small size, it's very hard to retain trees because you're changing the hydrology for the existing trees so much with the excavation. I really understand why you couldn't save anything more than the one at the front. And even if you don't have to save that, I don't think it would be a big loss because you're putting in other deciduous trees there. I'm actually, though, thinking of it, it just reminded me of one thing. Do you have any conifers? That would be my only comment, is that maybe
actually in the proposed trees we don't because obviously we thought that to have good conifers we probably needed more space, etc. And the deciduous, they grow with the project and they assume a scale with the project, so we kind of decided to go purely deciduous here.
Yeah,
we do have obviously hedges and taxes and all that stuff. But
actually I'm not going to make a comment about that, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't have anything else to say right now.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kate. Tony, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Very clear. The nature of this project is dear to my heart and everybody else's in terms of responsible infill to existing neighborhoods. So that's to be commended, and how you've managed to squeeze so much onto the site is also to be commended. I think, however, there's so much on here that, in all honesty, I'm feeling a little uneasy about how you've put it together. And I guess I just had some questions to kind of ease my mind. So if you could bear with me here. My first question would have been, given how close you are to the one house, and you have the width of your driveway on one whole side yard, can you tell me why you didn't flip the whole thing side to side so your driveway and greater side setback is related to the house with the smaller setback than it is to the one with the larger setback? In other words, you've tightened up the already tight setback next door on one side and basically double the setback for the other house. Could you just enlighten me as to what your thinking was there?
Well, the other one is an apartment building, right? Or a duplex or fourplex, I can't remember which. So it's basically just a large blank wall. And for the most part, we wanted to keep it, the sun to be on the R1 property because of the shading of the building. And again, I still think that's the right spot to move. We don't have a lot of room to make it move. I mean, as you can appreciate, the previous one only had 4 feet before, but we managed to make the building thinner. And the only thing that's driving the thinness of the building from top to bottom on the drawing is just fitting the cars in under the building, right, as opposed to a whole parking lot at the back, which the previous scheme had. So I think that's just a compromise of that, again, because again, that property could get redeveloped. There actually, the 2 properties to the top of the screen were very similar in their nature. So that's probably the real reason why we did it.
Oh, well, not sure I totally understood that, or
okay, well,
that if that's
the driveway takes up a certain amount of space, right? So
yeah,
we didn't want to crowd it super tight to be the absolute minimum. It might be like a foot or 2 wider, if I remember.
No. What I'm saying, perhaps I didn't explain myself. If you took your whole site plan, looking at it as we were on the screen, and flipped it top to bottom, so your driveway's on the top instead of on the bottom, then you'd have a much greater space to the building to the north instead of a much tighter space to the building to the north. And the opposite, you'd have equal spaces on both sides, I guess, of your building is what I'm saying, relative to your 2 neighbors. Yeah. That was what I was curious about, why you did it the way you did it, as opposed to
Well, and that's exactly why we did, is because we wanted to. The other one was a house that had more windows on it. The other one's a blank wall, basically, and
Okay.
nothing else. And then, from a solar point of view, it's less
Okay.
shading on this other property. So, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll
No
move
problem.
on from that. The other area that I have a little bit of a head scratch over is the amenity area in the front. It's pretty unusual to do that kind of a location for an amenity, and it may be the greatest thing since sliced bread instead of set a new trend. But we're going to make sure that it's something that the residents are actually going to use. And if they use it, then there's a minor concern I would have for privacy for that one bedroom that's facing right onto it, whether it's visual or acoustic, I don't know. But and then in conjunction with that observation about how comfortable that amenity is, you also have 8 parking stalls, I believe, for the 5 units. Is that correct?
Mhm.
So a wild thought, if you reduce the parking down to 1 per unit for a total of 5 stalls and took the 3, call them surplus stalls, up in the corner and located the amenity area there instead, it would be a little more secluded and perhaps more private for the residents. And also it could spill out into that nice paved driveway that you've got, and could actually be a much larger space if an occasion ever warranted such a, line dancing party or something. I don't know what. But anyway, so again, I'm just a little bit uneasy. Again, that's the word I use about the location and nature of that amenity space. So I just raised that concern.
Yeah, I guess our concern was that it would be difficult to have less parking, right? The variances would be that much more.
Okay, that's your answer. Thank you.
Yep.
I think that's all I've got. I don't have any issue with the variances that are being requested. It's the only way to do these kind of projects, so I would support them. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Ken, would you like to go ahead? You might find it's easier if you turn your camera off when you're talking, just might give you a better reception, okay?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, good.
Okay. Yeah, first of all, I agree with Tony. I don't have any variances. When I look at the overall site, I see a lot of pavement. I don't see much green, and I don't know if it's not, made any development permit applications in Nanaimo. I don't know if the front yard cannot be used. But
Ken, you're breaking up quite. Ken, you're breaking up quite a bit.
To pick up your waste. Okay.
Maybe just try turning your video
I'll
off.
cancel my video and just try to speak slower. Anyways, I was just looking at the access for a garbage truck to come in. I know in the development I have, that kind of garbage truck would take it to the back of your driveway. And as I said, when I look at the site plan, I see a lot of hard surfaces, and I don't see much green space. And at the neighboring front yard, very wide. What you proposed in your parking with your screens and landscaping, it would not be that obvious from the street, or it'd be much less of an intrusion, and you'd have a much bigger backyard. And so I'm just saying, why, if you flip the building the other way, as opposed to what Tony was suggesting, the residents of that unit would have a much bigger backyard in which you could do many more opportunities for landscaping and barbecues and that kind of thing. the other thing is, I don't know, might make it easier for garbage pickup in the front. This drive, you have to get to the backyard just to pick up garbage and just to park, and that takes up a lot of the green space, and it might help with the tightness of the building to the side yards. So that was my only comment when I looked at the plan of this proposal. I think otherwise, in terms of massing and form and function, I think it all works well. The only, again, this would relate to the 2 feet.
We're not hearing you there, Ken.
The units that are facing south and west really get hot in the summer, and almost unlivable for some of the residents who in the building where I.
We're not hearing you, Ken.
I guess I can comment on that little bit that I heard, I guess, right? So because the decks are very deep, certainly for the south facing ones, and that they're recessed back, the living room areas from that, you should have a lot more shading with that. Again, it's recessed back when you look at it in terms of the plan, even if it's from the west. In terms of garbage, I guess the problem is the parking bylaw, or not the parking bylaw, but the design guidelines say that we shouldn't be parking in the front face beyond the building. So that's the dilemma. I mean, I guess that's the comments you're talking about are exactly the way the other buildings were built, right? You put all the parking in the front and then they have their bit of yard in the back, right? But then that kind of works counter. And that's the problem with these lots is they don't have a lane on the back of them to deal with these kind of issues. So it's a dichotomy, right? So which has got a more priority, or what is staff or council willing to accept by doing something that's quite counter to what the guidelines are? Because these are really challenging lots, especially they're not really wherever meant. These R8 lots were meant to be all amalgamated. When I talked to the planner years ago, so but unfortunately, a lot of them have not happened that way. So then, how do you redevelop these sites? This kind of, and how do you deal with this kind of missing middle, where we're trying to densify a single family dwelling lot, right? They're all really tough to do.
Okay, Ken, did you have anything else you wanted to add there?
No, I can understand the reasoning for why it was done that way, but it just shows you, that there has to be some thought given to both these big lots with no lanes.
Yeah.
The only thing I could think of is that you end up maybe landscaping a strip along your driveway with some landscaping that you can drive over, and that would give you your break that you want to keep the driving lane over a little bit. But I mean, it will get, it's 5 cars as opposed to a house or something, but can it be grown short enough or be durable enough? Maybe Russia has some plants that will do that, but I find it's always a challenge with that kind of stuff because we get so many weeds that blow in. I've had it on my house too, and just ended up getting graveled over in the end after 10 years. So,
okay. So if you're, are you done then, Ken?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, Kevin, are you available there?
I think I'm still alive here. I thought this was only supposed to be Ken's problem.
You're gonna tell me to flip it upside down now, right?
Yeah. No, it's sorry, Raymond. I really didn't get a chance to hear any of the presentation. Really, only heard a little bit of Kate's and Ken's comments. So I really don't know what's been asked. I don't really have a lot of questions. Thank you, Raymond, and your team for the presentation. Obviously, a very difficult site. You're asking a lot for variances. pedestrian circulation around the site, access from the east units to get to the parking or to the bicycle storage, and also for the 2 units on the west elevation to travel all the way around the building to get to the front. Obviously, there's circulation problems that are there. You really, there's nothing, I can't see anything you can do to resolve those, but those concerns are there. The only real question I have is really regarding the retaining wall. I'm not sure if it was brought up, but I'm assuming there's about a 5-foot tall retaining wall at the rear of the property that will taper down on both the east and west property lines towards the front. Is that correct?
It's probably not quite that much. We haven't really set the grades on it yet, but it'd be just under 1 meter if you're looking at where the garbage enclosure is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the drive aisle that's going in, I'm assuming it's going to be coming in off the street. It's going to be pretty much flat until it reaches past the doorway, and then it's going to slope down about 1 foot to where the parking level is.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. The existing apartment is built up higher already behind us, so much of that height is already there.
Okay. Yeah. And the only other thing is obviously the parking area with the 22 foot drive aisle to get into the underground parking, and then you're having 22 feet's tight as it is, but when you're applying it to parking stalls on the rear of the property that are small car is really going to be a challenge for even mid-sized vehicles. But it is what it is, I guess. The people that are going to be buying these units are going to have to deal with it. Obviously, there's no street parking and really no parking around for quite a distance for people to park to get in there. So it is a challenge. You're undertaking it, the developer's undertaking it. So when people buy these units, everything else, I love the form and character, the landscape concept with basically what you have to work with. It's a shame that you couldn't retain that fir tree, but aside from that, I do like the project. I just wish the property was a little bit bigger, or what Ken mentioned, if it had a lane access, a lot of these issues wouldn't be here. So, but other than that, I guess I support the variances, and I hope this all works out in the long run. So, thanks for the presentation.
I just comment that the other ones that are under the building, they're a bit wider than what they require. So
I'm aware of that, especially the middle one.
Yeah, because it's hard to turn right away to get in, right? So yeah,
especially when you have the structural columns right there at the extreme of it. So
if it ends up being all concrete in there, it's not too bad. We span three stalls typically in an underground parkade, so that would help there. And the only other little bit is we got that little 3 foot. We'd have to take out some of the landscaping next to that spall to the bottom right of the drawing. So
whichever way, like, it's obviously, it would be easier for vehicles to back into the stalls, whether they're the small car or the vehicles underneath. But then for the vehicle that's closest to the east side, probably if you did back into the underground, you're going to have to seesaw to get out anyways. But it will be a challenge, but it is what it is. I would have liked to seen 24 feet instead of 22 feet, and also not all small car, but unless you move the building closer to the street.
Well, I mean, if we encroach like the previous scheme was, then we could have a lot more room, right? So
yeah. So I didn't hear any other comments. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to listen, but other than that, that's all I have to say. So thanks, Raymond.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. Hillary?
Yeah, thank you. I think overall this looks great. I love the densification here. The parking does look a little tight. I wondered about the turnaround. Like, I just have a question where there's a turnaround marked at the front of the building. Is the idea there that cars pull in and then like back down the lane, or
no. It's just if there's a rumor that, say somebody went in and maybe dropped somebody off at the main entry or something, that they could back up and turn and go out that way. Again, it's also, we need it for that width, well, less than 2'6", for the fire truck to get in just a little bit closer to the building. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and then I was just really pumped to see that you had included like a bird-friendly upper portion of the windows, like just taking into consideration bird-friendly design and the exterior lighting, trying to sort of keep it to a minimum. So just, yeah, really appreciate your work on that. And I think, yeah, we're going to need more of this, and it will be tough to get people to transition to those smaller cars or away from relying on that. But this is the direction that we're headed, and you're helping us do that. So thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Hillary. Just leading off from that last comment about the cars and so on, are you adding any electric charging places? Are you wired in for that? I think you have to be, right?
Everywhere. Yeah. EVC, what it says on the drawing. So
great. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to be the bit of an outlier here because I'm finding this. First of all, in terms of form and character in this building, I'm a little concerned of it being popped into a neighborhood with single family houses on one side, and then I know there's a larger multifamily next to that, and that's fine. But in terms of the design, it really doesn't make any effort to really fit into the neighborhood. Every other building on that block has a gabled roof, hip roof, or whatever, and you've put in a very different design, and it's standing out not only 3 floors and so on. So I find that a little disappointing that there hasn't been a lot of effort made to blend the building in a bit better in terms of its style. But I see nobody else has really commented on that. I do appreciate the fact that we're trying to add density, and I have no problem with that. And I think it's actually a good site for that. And there's nothing wrong with the building. It's just, I don't feel it fits the form and character of the neighborhood, and could do more to do that. But I realize that's basically a redesign. My other concern with this building that really makes me awkward is that side driveway. I live actually in a building like that, where you enter on the side off the driveway, and it's really very dangerous. I've had people come out our door and step into, like, kids with their grandkids running out, and somebody's coming up the driveway. And in this project, you're actually asking, I think, for a narrower driveway even. So what you get is people, because your door is a bit inset, which is ours is as well, you step out, and if you don't look both ways, you could be stepping into a car. There's really no, I don't know how you do that with a side entrance. I think in many ways, that's why we need an entrance on the front, would be much safer. Even with some sort of pedestrian way marked, I don't think it's going to really resolve the problem. So there's that safety issue. And then I think it was suggested that you have the bike rack close to the door, and I don't think that's even possible. You just be adding more obstructions and making it even more difficult for pedestrians. So I'm not for that. I agree with you. I think it has to go in the back in this design. I don't know where else you'd put it. It's just that's the case. And I know there's been some discussion about why you're on that one side, and I actually like the drive aisle on the side you've got it, because it gives a bit more distance between your building and the single family home. So rather than you being sort of snugged right up against it, I think that's probably the better option in my view. So otherwise, I think, yeah, we need density and so on, but yeah, I would really like to see the building reflect the neighborhood a bit more in terms of its form and character. And I also would like to see another solution to that side entrance. I just find I don't think it's a very good way to handle the entrance into the building for pedestrians. So that being said, that's my contribution. And so I'm just going to look at our recommendations here. We've had quite a bit of discussion. I didn't hear an awful lot of actual recommendations, other than I think, Kate, you mentioned shortening the height of the fence as it approaches the front of the property, as I understood. I think that's what you were saying. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And consider changing the paving patterning to indicate the pedestrian route to the front entrance. Mm-hmm. Okay. add some conifers on the site?
No, I don't want to add that one.
Okay. And Tony, you made some comments, but I wasn't sure if you were making any recommendations there. Did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, as I said, with a very tight infill kind of development such as this, obviously there are going to be compromises and critical decisions made one way or the other. So I was just curious how the layout arrived in the form that it did, and I was given a response, and I have no recommendations to make
Right.
following that. The only thing I'd add, if I could, Marie, is to maybe alleviate your concern a little bit about fitting into the neighborhood. The only way to make a building of this size fit in the neighborhood is to stick some kind of gable roof thingy on it or around it or in it. And with a building that's 3 stories tall, it would be horrendous. So I think that this is a reasonable contemporary direction that a lot of new infill is going, with either flat roof or the butterfly roof or something of this nature. But gable roofs are fine on much smaller buildings, but I certainly wouldn't kind of shoehorn something like that in in this instance. So
the gable adds more height then.
Well, definitely, but just the proportion and so forth of the massing, I think with gables would be extremely awkward and difficult to achieve. But again, just my opinion. So.
Okay, no, appreciate that. Kate?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that too, because just on where Bradley turns to, what's the street? Where it takes the sharp till Millstone, you then have an expansive amount of apartment architecture that this does sort of relate to, and that's only 3 properties over. So I think it's such a mixed bag here that it doesn't. That's, for me, is not a concern, given there's lots of other building architecture that this is referencing that's very close. It's only the single family right adjacent that I would say it's a little bit different from, but just 3 properties over a Millstone, you have very, very similar, older, but similar looking, quite large expanse of buildings. So
yeah, I guess it's like the Vancouver specials that filled all the Vancouver neighborhoods at one time.
Definitely more mixed bag. So I think you can get away with diversity, is from my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate that. Kevin, you wanted to say something?
I would just again jump in on that, because this neighborhood and the road just up above on Rose Hill, these developments have been popping up quite a bit, and pretty much all the houses in this neighborhood are older houses, and the ones next door are houses that are going to be inevitably knocked down, and similar developments will be combined probably on either individual lots or amalgamated together. And this is the same thing we struggled with for developments down on Halliburton, which are now a lot of them are coming to fruition, and it's just something that's going to happen. And the lower profile roof compared to a gabled roof, maybe a hip roof might work, but this type of architecture is becoming quite predominant now in residential neighborhoods and has become quite popular. So I sympathize with what the neighbors might have to deal with, but they're living in houses that are quite often 1,000 square feet, and they will find over time that this particular street, just like Rose Hill up above, are going to be subject to people and developers that will look at putting up multifamily units. And I know the city is in support of that, especially along major corridors like this. So also I would like, because Marie did bring it up regarding the entry on the side, I would like to see if Raymond would like to respond whether or not he looked at alternative siting solutions to deal with the entry, whether or not he looked at putting an entry on the front, because obviously he's worked on this project much longer than we've had time to look at it. So I'd like to see if you had a comment on that. Thank you.
That's a good question. I would like to hear that as well, because not being an architect, I don't know how you can rejig that and like
This
say,
is, yeah, I mean, obviously, in order to fit 5 units on a lot this size, you have to minimize your circulation and your stairs. So and we've run into this problem on a few other lots that we haven't gone to design panel with. We're trying to fit a front entry because you're trying to get back, and it's just too narrow to fit a unit on it, or even if it's asymmetrical on the front face of the building, it's just, they're not very wide lots, right? So I think you just end up, and like I say, we're basically discouraged to parking in the front, so we can't make a more fully width building or a square shaped building that's pushed back. So there's no easy solution to any of these things, and it's even to go underground, we couldn't do it either, right? I mean, ideally we would have put the parking in the front and gone up higher, but I can't do that without getting into a full public corridor and 2 full exit stairs. It just doesn't work. So then you're going back up to like the old scheme was of having these really skinny stairs that are going up quite high, right? Like a 3-story interior private stair. And I just don't think that's safe either when you have 4 people living together. If it had lanes on here, the whole scheme would be totally different. So, and that's the problem, is some of these older neighborhoods like this area don't have that in a lot of the roads. So
okay. Let's go back to our recommendations. And Ken, I wasn't clear. Did you want to make a recommendation, or you're just discussing some of the problems with the property? Ken? Okay.
I'm fine. No, I didn't have a recommendation. I'm fine with the explanation of why I can't have parking in front.
Okay. And is anybody else game to add I guess I should just, Kevin, did you want to add something about the retaining wall, or no, you're just asking about it? Okay. And I don't know if there's any point in asking for a consideration to look at putting the front entrance somewhere else at this point with this design. So I think we're sort of stuck with it. If you're going to go 5 units, I guess that's what's going to have to happen. I'm not really sure. So we'll leave it at that, I guess. And I haven't heard any objection to the variances. So I only have two recommendations then. Shorten the height of the fence as it approaches the front of the property. Consider changing the paving pattern to indicate pedestrian route to the front entrance. And that's it. If I missed anything. Okay. If I could have a motion to accept the proposal as presented with approval for the variances with those 2 recommendations from somebody. Tony, and seconder. Kate. All in favor?
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yes.
Ken says yes there. Okay, great, thanks. Okay, well, thanks for coming in and doing your presentation, and good luck with the project.
thank you.
Okay, we have a second presentation this evening, and this is a property on Nelson Road, and Sadie Robinson, our city planner, will present it or introduce it. Go ahead, Sadie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, panel members. Development permit application DP 1294 is for a 16-unit multifamily development at 6004 Nelson Road, which consists of 4 2-story townhouse buildings, each with 4 residential units. The subject property is located on the north side of Nelson Road, northeast of Randerson Ridge Elementary School, and immediately southwest of Rutherford Park. The property is zoned low-density residential R6 and is designated suburban neighborhood in city plan. It falls within Development Permit Area 8 for form and character, and the General Development Permit Area Design Guidelines apply to the proposed development. There is one proposed variance associated with the development, which is to reduce the minimum required front yard setback from 6 meters to 4.7 meters, a variance of 1.3 meters. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And who's presenting for us tonight?
I'll be presenting. I'm Will with Delineate Designs.
Great. Okay, go ahead and you can share your screen.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just bear with me here as I okay, I trust everybody can see that. Just by way of introduction, I have two other members of our team here tonight. We have Chris Winjack with Ladder Landscape Architects, and Scott Jensen is here as well from Civil Department of Herald Engineering. We may have representation of the ownership group, but they may be listening in, but I don't see them present. I will just give you, well, thank you, Sadie, for the introduction and kind of the context on this thing. I'll just run through some of the highlights on this and then turn it over to both Chris and Scott for their components. So as Sadie mentioned, this is a multifamily development, and I think Sadie kind of adequately described its location, but here's the aerial for reference. So highlighted in the orange is the site, fairly long, fairly narrow. North on this plan is to the left of the screen. So fronting on Nelson Road, Renderson Ridge School, right across the street. To the east, we have the Blairmore multifamily. I think that consists primarily of duplex type housing. Nelson Wood over here, which is very similar, I think, to the Blairmore. More recent development here, again, multifamily townhouse. And here to the west is an enclave of older housing, single family stock. And then lastly is McGregor Creek Park, which is actually quite a ravine that quite a drop from the property. The property itself is not level, but it's a very consistent grade from Nelson Road at about a 6 to 7% grade back towards the rear of the site. There is an aquatic setback that cuts across the corner of the site here. I'll just give you a couple of street views here. I'm sure you've got them in your information package. This is looking west. This is one of the units at Blairmore. Actually find that this is actually quite a pretty streetscape. Clearly we took these photos on a sunny day in the fall, but quite nice. I mean, the mature single family neighborhoods, vegetation is growing in. There's a tree backdrop to all of this with McGregor Creek Park in the back. I guess the Blairmore is got enough age that the landscaping has matured and created a nice street edge. Orange Arrow, of course, is the frontage of our site, and kind of identifiable by the chain link fence that's there. Just one other photo, and that is looking exactly the opposite way. So here's some of our older single family housing stock. Again, Orange Arrow is the our street frontage. This car is parked right in front of the school. Sadie mentioned this is 16 units. It's 4 buildings, 4 units per building. What we've done is with block 1, we've oriented it towards the street for street presence. The other 3 building blocks, we have stepped and kind of used this aquatic setback and a rear yard space as our guideline for the housing form to follow. That also set up a nice little internal drive system that retains some trees and creates an amenity space quite central on the lot. This line through here is the limits of the aquatic setback area and protected by fence line. mentioned the main drive aisle that we've got here. We've also got a secondary little lane system here, backloading the units that are street facing. This is also our emergency vehicle turnaround. I think I don't think I have too much more to add. I won't add too much with this slide here. This is more a technical drawing showing parking stall, how we've accommodated the parking, and sufficient maneuvering within behind. Other aspects just of the site layout, dimensioning, and so forth. Maybe the only thing I can highlight on this would be we do have an image here of sample for bike rack and a luminaire. I will show you on the site here. Site lighting, we're proposing that we have 3 here along the street edge that also illuminates the amenity area. Balance of the site, I think, will be adequately lit by lighting that is on the building. We have essentially 2 different unit types. All of these units, incidentally, are 3-bedroom, 2-story, single-car garage. Main living is on the main floor. Bedroom areas are on second floor space. 2 unit types. Typically, we have a unit that is, well, this is actually showing up as being end of the building, but there's a slightly narrower unit that is typically mid-block on buildings 2, 3, and 4, and end units that are ever so slightly wider that cap off the ends. All of them, as mentioned, have a single car garage. There's sufficient length in there that we're storing the, or have room, a little alcove for the recycling, garbage and composting, and bicycle and a charge station. In terms of the exterior elevations, this is actually the block of units facing Nelson Road. I find that with our units, the 2 types that we have, and in some instances they are mirror imaged. In other instances, they are offset. We also have 2 or 3 different color schemes, and we find by alternating all of these things that we have the ability to give these are all old tricks, but they I think they're fairly effective here in giving each unit its own identity. I didn't mention or didn't point out on the floor plan that all of these units essentially have 2 porches. There is an entry porch on one side of the building, and living space on the other also has a weather protected porch facing amenity areas. So along Nelson Road, fairly level along Nelson Road, all on the same footprint. And as we work our way down the site, again, here's an accurate representation of the kind of slope that we get. This would be building 2. This is actually where the site is the steepest. It gets a little bit flatter as we work our way down the hill. But again, you can see how the units are independently stepped from one another. The building form in general is fairly familiar. I think it's certainly in context with everything else, both in terms of traditional gable roofs. The fit and finish is very similar to other things that are happening in the neighborhood. We have injected a little bit of slightly more contemporary materials on some of the facades using a hardy panel and alternating with board and batten and some horizontal siding on some of the others. Again, the site is, or this block 3 is a little bit flatter, but again, we're stepping all the units, and again, sort of forward and backwards and up and down to ensure that all driveways are fairly level. Same with the entrances into the units. I guess I have one more image there, but again, it's very similar. Just a couple things to point out. This is just a little bit larger detail, a little bit larger scale representation. And again, these would be the Nelson Road facing units, just to highlight the arbor that we've got at each entrance to the suite. Again, there's a porch element that's in behind that, and going with a natural look cladding adjacent to the entrance system, just to give them a little bit of a color punch and highlight that entrance from the street. Streetscape. Sorry about the small scale, but it gets stretched out across the length of the site. But again, that gives you a sense of the lay of the land from one side to the other. It does drop off fairly steeply beyond, well, off the frame actually, down towards McGregor Creek. And lastly, we have a rendering of what this would look like from Nelson Road. Again, I just described sort of the entrance details and the screening that is adjacent to each one of those. Yeah, there's a hint at the wiggle on the road or the driveway as we head down, and you can see some of the amenity space and the playground areas that are there. I believe that kind of concludes the architectural point of it. Chris, can I get you to speak to the landscaping?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to just go to the next slide and I can just speak to it, or I can share screen? Doesn't matter.
No, that's fine. I'll point, you talk.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, so I'm seeing it a little bit pixelated right now. I don't know if that's the same for everyone. So the landscape design for the site, we're kind of juggling a few things here. So we'll start at the street frontage. One thing that we wanted to do was create a really soft edge to that sidewalk. So rather than having any front fencing, we have a landscape buffer, and then we have arbors marking the entries to the entry walks coming off the sidewalk, and then the front lawn planting behind with some trees closer to the buildings, and then getting to the front entryways. So really trying to provide that pedestrian buffer, but not actually create any real sort of visual barrier of like a hard screen. Once you come into the site, we start, as you can see in the section, the site does slope pretty significantly. So we start needing to look at how we're going to deal with stormwater. So we have a couple of main areas of rain garden on the site. One is just to the north, so to the left on the page of the amenity space, and at the far end of the site, at the bottom of the hill, we have a large rain garden. So those two in combination are how we're kind of trying to infiltrate a lot of the surface runoff, which is obviously going to be shedding off the road as it runs down the hill. All of the entry gardens have a combination of native and adaptive shrubs, perennials, ornamental grasses, lots of flowering stuff with an eye for pollinators, and all of that's kind of all at those front entries right next to the front patios. And then we have alternating species of flowering trees. So we have Callery pears and Japanese stewardias marking the entrances to the site, or to the units. So those are getting sun from the south and west, obviously. And then to the east side of the site, which is up on the page, it's a little bit it's going to be a little bit shadier, and so it's only really getting morning sun and a little bit of afternoon. But once the sun passes the buildings, it all gets started to shade out. So that's where we've started to introduce more shade adaptive plants like vine maple, or trees rather, like vine maples, in those rear gardens some Japanese maples as well. And then we have a good smattering of conifers on the site wherever we have the space to get them. So we've tried to keep them away from the buildings. They're more towards the perimeter areas of the site and kind of around the amenity space. Primarily Douglas firs. And then I believe we also have a combination of forest pansy redbuds, so eastern redbuds, Cercis canadensis, closer to the streetscape, and then red alder trees in the linear swale, which is on the east side of the site, running down that site. So just like we have rain gardens pulling to infiltrate off of the road, we need to deal with it on the east side of the site, but behind the buildings as well. So we have a long linear swale there. We've tried to maximize patio sizes in the rear garden areas for the units. So everyone gets planting, some lawn. It really depends on the configuration. As you can see, we've been dealing with some, it's an oddly shaped property line and setback from the creek where we can't really bring the rear garden into it. And so there are some slightly oddly shaped rear garden areas. So depending on what the configuration is, we've tried to give people as much living space, like usable living space as we can for barbecues and tables and all that. And then in some cases, they'll be planting additional planting in pots and doing gardening that way. We have a variety of different fencing on the site. So we have the wood perimeter fence, which is 6 feet high, and that's typically along the property line everywhere apart from the front yard setback, and it does not go around the creek setback either. So once we get to the creek setback area, we go to the split rail fence detail, and it has a more park-like kind of setting. You can see through it, and you're obviously looking into that existing vegetation in there. Worth noting that the development's going to require the removal of a fair number of trees, and so we've really done our best to fit as many trees back into the site as we can, and a lot of that, there are a lot that fall within the creek setback, as you can see. So we've followed the guidelines for spacing in there, and then towards the north side of the site as well, we've got a good number of conifers, which is kind of directly replacing what's going to be taken out. There's just large stands in there. And then obviously trying to retain as many trees as we possibly can. In terms of materiality, we're using some large format pavers for the patios, and then we'll be doing wood chip under some of the existing conifers. River rock borders for maintenance around the buildings where we need to get in and kind of keep plant material off of the building envelope. And then last but not least, we can talk about the amenity spaces. So on the west side of the property, kind of central there where the road bumps out, we've got 2 amenity spaces. Unfortunately, we don't really have space to put them on the same side of the road as the buildings themselves. There's not really any way to feasibly do that, so we've carved out this area for them. So we have 2 right now. We have essentially what's going to be a playground. It's either going to be a combination of natural play elements and maybe a small CSA structure. It depends on when we get into the more detailed design in terms of safety setbacks and all of that kind of stuff. So we want to keep it, obviously, I don't want to put safety setbacks like all the way to the sidewalk that's adjacent to the road either. I want to keep it as far back as we can. So we have the sort of children's play, and then to the north of it, to the left of it on your screen, we have a fire pit concept. So a seating wall and room for some site furniture seating around like a gas propane fire pit kind of deal, so that there's some outdoor shared space that's a little bit bigger than what people have in their backyards if they want to gather and do that kind of thing in more of a sort of common space. We also have a little bit of a feature going over the rain garden just to the north of that that fire pit area too, where we have a nice little bridging feature coming across. And then leading, across the drive aisle, we have those two designated crosswalk areas that lead to the sidewalk on the other side, giving people access there. Worth noting as well, just from a maintenance perspective, that we've tried to keep it as easy to maintain as possible. So to that end, what you see in between the banks of buildings are sort of shared maintenance access routes where landscape any landscape maintenance crews would be able to go in, and we actually have there'll be like hidden panel gates on the dividing screens between the backyards, so that they can access all the way through. So obviously they'll come in from one side and they can access 2 yards, come in from the other side, they can access the other 2 yards. So there's not going to be any need to, do odd things, because we do have the two central rear gardens that are kind of isolated from an accessible route that's not someone's private yard. So you can see the plant list as well. So we've focused on native and adaptive plants, tried to do a mix of coniferous trees and deciduous trees. There's a little swale section as well, so that you can take a peek at how that's interfacing along the eastern side. Eastern side?
This is east
side
here.
Yes. I think that pretty much covers it for the landscape. I'm happy to answer any questions that come up.
Thanks, Chris. And Scott, I see you there in the wings. Why don't I stop sharing my screen, and I'll let you speak to Sybil.
Okay. Just get the drawing queued up. Yeah, I got kicked out earlier, so I'm going to leave my camera off and see if that helps at all. Can everyone see the drawing up?
I can, Scott. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a fairly straightforward in terms of servicing and access. I think kind of already shown we've got a sort of a common access driveway from Nelson Road that comes in to access all the units from an on-site driveway. The stormwater, actually, I think Chris actually covered everything there pretty well. We're trying to maximize the use of sort of landscape swales and sort of overland flow, because there's not really a formal storm service to the site. So we're kind of trying to split the flow up around the site to minimize sort of overloading any one point. There is a storm sewer in a right of way that's on this development to the that's the east, kind of up here, that multifamily development that runs down from Nelson. And there's an outlet that goes down into the creek. So as much as possible, try and get sort of the top half of the site into a swale that has a cutoff drain and enters that same system, with the rest of it kind of draining into a collection of various swales kind of in and around the amenity area, and then down to the base of the low end of the property down here, where we'll have a formal rain garden. And then sort of trying to keep all of this natural setback area as it was. It being the low end of the site, it's probably used to seeing a lot of water, but trying to just sort of semi-formalize a little bit of an overflow route overland, just so that in a really big storm event, it can overflow and again go down to the creek like it would have redevelopment. Sanitary sewer, there's a Sani sewer that runs kind of through a right of way, about a quarter of the way down the site through here. So we'll be aiming to connect to that. We've shown multiple options here with these sort of lower units, either having individual pump stations or one common one at the bottom for the whole development that would bring everything to the top and bring it away. And water, again, is a shared on-site system, so we'll come into kind of a little meter backflow prevention room on the first building, and then from there just sort of distribute it fire and domestic servicing to each building, with a single on-site hydrant to provide coverage to the farthest buildings. And I think that generally covers it.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay. Do you want me to leave the site plan up here or questions? Or go to the architectural one?
No, we should actually stop sharing screen if we'll do our round table now. Are you done, William?
I am, thanks.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we'll give the panel a chance to give their comments and ask questions. So, Tony, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I had one question I must have missed, the small one, but for family housing could be useful. Are there basements in these units?
No, there aren't.
Oh, okay. Did you consider that, or is there some site reason or cost reason you didn't? Because obviously it gives you a hell of a lot more space for relatively low dollars.
That wasn't part of the program. I expect that we may well be on crawl spaces, so there's the benefit of at least having some storage down there, but we hadn't considered full basements.
I was just curious. I'm not sure where to start. I think I love everything about this project. I love townhouses to start with, so you got me right there at the get-go. In terms of the overall site layout, I think it's great. The best thing about it, I think, unlike the odd project we've seen here, is the lovely wavy driveway that you put in to get away from that sort of airport runway thing that's so expedient in a lot of other projects. I think that's great, and that sets up the landscaping amenity central area extremely nicely with what you've got there. The street presence on the public street is a really good contribution to the neighborhood, I think. The entry porches and the trellises and that kind of thing are fairly obvious. The overall design, the form and character, you got a very traditional gable roof shapes, but you've done it in a very contemporary fashion with the colors and the materials, a consistent palette, but with enough individual variety so that you can get that distinction, but it all hangs together very nicely. Unit layouts themselves very attractive to families, and I think I'm going to stop there and just catch my breath. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Will and Chris and Scott for your presentation. I would echo everything that Tony mentioned. I think you took what normally could have been a disadvantage in siting the building with that watercourse setback and used it to your advantage, and that serpentine curved drive aisle works very, very nicely, and also creating the amenity space. Not much really to comment on other than a couple of minor things, but I think the siting, you did a great job. Form and character, echoing what Tony mentioned, the use of steep roofs and the materials and colors to individualize the units works very, very well, especially how you've dealt with the buildings and stepping them down the site as well. Landscape concept, I think Chris, you did a very nice job. I like the amenity space. The only questions I really have are regards to, it looks like you're going to have 2 sidewalks cutting across the drive aisle. Is that correct?
Yeah, at the moment we have a small run of sidewalk on the western side that runs kind of the length in front of all the amenity, and then a crosswalk at either end.
Yeah, so from the amenity space to the sidewalk, there's one at the bottom of the amenity space and one from the top.
Correct, yeah.
And are you just going to go a painted surface? Are you going a textural change, or?
We haven't really decided yet, but it could be something like a material change in the drive aisle, pavers marking the cross. That would be nicer than painted, but we haven't really discussed it.
Okay. Yeah, it's something that you probably want fairly nicely defined, if at all possible. I don't think vehicles are going to be screaming up and down that drive aisle, but the amenity spaces, especially for the playground, are very close to that. And anything there that can highlight it would probably work nice. I'm not going to put it in as a recommendation unless somebody else feels that it should be, but maybe just take some care to those, designing those so that they kind of punch out a bit. It appears that you're showing a bike rack to just beside the parallel parking visitor stall. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, sort of right at the start of the curve, before you start really going down the hill.
Okay.
Yeah, we did have some trouble finding locations for the visitor parking for the bike racks that didn't just end up in someone's front yard.
Okay. And did you give any thought to switching the parking stall and the bike rack so the bike rack is closer to the playground?
We hadn't, but that's a good idea.
Yeah, because that was really the only thing, because it's kind of sitting there out, away from everything, maybe having it near the playground.
Sure.
But other than that, the tree retention, obviously with the watercourse setback and keeping a lot of those fir trees is going to work very well with the project. And this is a very nice one. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Hillary, would you like to go?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't think I have any recommendations to contribute. I see why it's been designed this way. I think it's great that these are all 3-bedroom units, which is something that we're desperately lacking. So yeah, really happy to see the property densified in this way, and a recognition about replacing the number of trees that are being taken out for this. Overall, I think it looks quite beautiful, and yeah, happy to hear the recommendations from other members. Thank you.
Thanks, Hillary. Ken, do you want to go?
I really thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I voiced the opinion of the others, and I really like the project. I think it's been very sensitively done, just from the view from Nelson Street and the way you've scaled the housing, the townhouses and the 4 units really adds, I think, to the streetscape. And then I really think you took advantage of the slope and how you've managed to design units that really fit into that. And I thought was a commendable design. I have no problem with the variance, and I think it's a good project, and I hope it goes ahead. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ken. And last but not least, Kate.
Yes, great. Thank you, Will, Chris, Scott, for your presentation. And I agree with everything's been said. I think you have all the right elements put together here. And so I just kind of wanted to speak a little bit more specifically to your amenity space and just some thoughts that popped into my head when I'm looking at it. And I think you're going to flush this out as you move the design forward. But seeing that little bridge, I think the kids are going to want to interact with it. And so you may want to reconsider the organization of that amenity space so that you can, and I can see them on little bikes and trikes. If you can create a little loop with that, I think that you will benefit. So I kind of see a little more massaging and thinking in that area. So this is more just comment. I don't think it's going to be a recommendation because I think you're going to be doing that. But to consider that rain garden and that bridge is also another fun, playful element, and to make sure it's accessible to the kids and the area. So whether you can kind of move through all of that space might be helpful. And also I agree with moving the bikes, because might as well put the bikes near that little bit of sidewalk that you're adding, because that makes sense, right? So that's my really only comment. And then I have one other. Was one of the staff comments was spoke to the possibility of adding maybe a path in that near your lower rain garden. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about that. if you had given that any consideration and maybe there was good rationale to not bring people into that space, or it kind of looks like you might have, it might be like grass and trees. So then it is usable. So I'm just kind of wondering.
Yeah, so it is just grass and trees, and then wood bark mulch under the canopy of the conifers at the moment. So it's accessible as sort of a mini parklet, in the same way that you might have used the space that exists right now. It's kind of a small space given the size of the rain garden to put a path in. It would be a pretty small loop, and I'm not sure that it would really add a whole lot that you couldn't just get from the grass that's going to be going in.
Maybe it's just you add something to sit on, in that area, which could be just nice, because it is nice. I realized you can walk in there, I think, so that's okay. Yeah. But yeah, I don't have any recommend. I suppose I don't know if I want to make a recommendation about the manatee space, but I think you heard my thoughts, and I think as you develop the design further, that will become tighter in how it works together.
Yeah, we'll definitely be looking at flipping those two around and then moving the bike parking as well. So
yeah, and even thinking, I just thought too, you may have parents sitting near the fire pit zone, and so having accessibility across, like having a way to access all the spaces might be useful.
Yep.
Because I think you have a seat wall kind of blocking it off, which there's some logic with the fire, but anyway, that's all. Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, everyone.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Well, I can't add much more to that. I agree with all the comments. I think you've produced a really sensitive design that's considerate of the neighborhood. It fits in really well. I can see it along there really nicely. I like the fact that Nelson Street's just, it looks like a few houses on there, but then in behind you get into the sort of larger complex. So it's kind of hidden in behind, and yeah, it's a great project. I look forward to seeing it happen. So no further comment on it, but thanks. So am I not hearing any recommendations? I think it's just approval, and I didn't hear any
there was just the one about moving the bike rack closer to the playground.
Okay, yeah, we can put that in. So one recommendation, move the bike rack closer to the playground. And then, yeah, and I didn't hear any objection to the variance. Am I correct there? Okay. Well, if I can have a motion to accept the proposal as presented with the one recommendation and with approval of the variance. Kevin, motion, and seconder, Ken, and all in favor. Hillary, you're in favor too, I'm assuming.
She doesn't get a vote.
Yeah, I'm a non-voting member. Sorry.
Oh, I was like, Tyler used to put his hand up. Okay. Anyway, well, thanks a lot. I think that does it. Appreciate you guys coming in, and enjoyed looking at your project. So good luck with it.
And thank you very much, everybody. Yeah. Appreciate the comments, and we look forward to this one moving ahead too. Thank you.
Great job, you guys.
Thanks so much for your input. Take care.
Okay. Panel members, if we have no other business, I don't think we do. Somebody want to give a motion to adjourn? Tony's giving a motion to adjourn. Kevin's seconding. All in favor? Great. Okay. Enjoy yourself down there, down south, Ken.